I'm going to try to make an announcement above all the noise. There is a silver Lexus RX 300 in the garage that has its lights on. There's a silver Lexus RX 300 North Carolina license plate with an ECU sticker.
Can I have everybody's attention? Hello?
Could I please have everyone's attention? Please, everyone take your seats, and again, if you could move to the center. There is a silver Lexus RX 300 North Carolina license plates with an ECU sticker in the garage with its lights on. If that rings a bell with anyone, you might want to slip out and take care of it.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that first session. In the second session, we look at possible commitments for peace. Those that we can make for those in conflict. If we implement them well, we can increase the sustainability of these spaces. If we motivate Zimbabwe's community leaders, as I highlight, transformational leadership equips them to build even in the middle of instability. If the rights of nature and of communities become an integral part of peace-building processes, such as the Colombian one, Francesca argues that only then we can attain the stable and lasting peace that the entire world needs. Finally, when we direct our energies onto refugees, Hannah teaches us that by making refugee mental health a top priority, we can see these commitments lead to sustainable peace. So on to me now. Our story takes place in a beautiful country in southern Africa. Once nicknamed the breadbasket of Africa, Zimbabwe once had a currency that rivaled the British pound in value. But now, following a 37-year rule by President Robert Mugabe, who gained power during independence in April 1980, we witnessed hyperinflation so high that we do not have our own currency anymore. And we accepted that Robert Mugabe would be our forever president. However, on the 21st of November, 2017, Robert Mugabe, the only president I have known my entire life, was forced to resign by the military. As Zimbabweans process and anticipate certain change, the focus is on politics, on opportunities for business, aid, elections, and resolving our current cash crisis. But looking back at this Gallup study, thousands of Zimbabweans were asked about what they thought would bring about an economic turnaround. And the overwhelming response was a change in leadership. This was solely in reference to political leadership. And I had to ask myself, why is such a premium placed on only political leadership? There's greed and corruption plaguing every strata of our society. We must further probe and understand the positioning of lay people in building culture and addressing such national challenges. Leadership studies has an ongoing debate on leadership styles that are transactional versus those that are transformational. Transactional looks at a reactive, almost managerial type of leadership that maintains the status quo versus the proactive futurist that is a transformational mediator leader. Who would you want working for you in peace? In the world, the transactional leadership style is the most common and almost comes natural to all of us. The style is common because it works in the short run, but some sectors need more than just management. The transactional leader inspires you by looking at your own self-interest as rewards and recognition, while transformational leaders energize you by thinking of their vision. In its worst form, we recognize infamously negative or purely transactional leadership. We know what it looks like. There's often a clear understanding about the problem. And it's a predatory style of leadership, even if I am your father. And it's easy when we think of who good leaders are to think of people like Malala Yousafzai, Eleanor Roosevelt, or Nelson Mandela, who this room is named after. Yet, before he was a leader and a hero to many, he was a guy like any other guy. But he had a journey where whatever was inside him had to be challenged, restored. He had to process a lot of things like forgiveness, love, discipline, and many other virtues that do not come natural to us. So how does a John or a Jane Doe become a transformational leader? Thinking of that picture above, we can all relate to it. We all know what's wrong. We all want change, but we don't want to change to lead change. As ordinary Jane or John Does, we tend to refuse the call for leadership. Maybe not so true of Rotarians, who often work on community projects, and you find that the layman or the laywoman doesn't see themselves as part of the bigger picture. This occurs especially when we emphasize that the political climate is the overall climate, or we maintain the narrative that political leadership is the only leadership we need to monitor and develop. This is why when it comes to ourselves, as I've said, the picture is often quite different. Harvard Business investigated the top voted leadership trait in the workplace, And it was inspiring and motivating others. Well done to Rotary International for having Be the Inspiration as the central theme for this coming year. But how do we inspire our followers? I'm reminded of that magical sports moment. We all know in that sports movie that's about more than sports. It's halftime, the team is losing, the team is discouraged and fed up. They're ushered into the gymnasium or locker room, and the coach understands exactly how the players feel and says words to encourage and inspire, even in the face of low odds to win. The coach doesn't change the game or the rules of the game, but he or she does connect the team to vision, purpose, and joy, even within their suffering. We understand the importance of this in all the games we watch, but we don't place the same value on the ability of coaches in community development that are often working against the odds. Extraordinary challenges require extraordinary leadership. Transformational leaders are extraordinary. Bernard Bass describes the 4 basic components of a transformational leader. Thinking of your own personal leaders, they possibly embody one or all of these attributes. These traits are important as they create engagement and connection to the vision. Just as the coach facilitates a shared vision in the approach, we need people who are role models, who inspire, who are people-driven, people who are innovative. To succeed more, we must consider why we fail to transform our sectors, and why we get mediocre outcomes, and why we fail when we push for change. Reading the above key errors, like underestimating the power of vision, failing to create a sufficiently powerful guiding coalition, and so on, can you begin to see the link between the traits of transformational leaders and the gaps in leading change? We are often at a crossroads where the community can either revert to its old ways and often fail, or become more future-focused and rise. Transformational leadership facilitates long-term change in the best way, and we must invest in it. This is because leadership isn't just a problem in Zimbabwe or an African problem, but it's important right here. Not only has recent research shown that 90% of Americans polled think that leadership is of national concern, and this is beyond political leadership, but more and more research shows that the costs of mediocre leadership are high. The percentage of productivity is highly affected in all workplaces. And when you attempt to put a dollar figure to this, you find that as of 2012, business researcher Michelle McQuaid discovered that mediocre leadership was costing the US economy up to $360 billion a year. Similar studies looking at such losses have been conducted by Deloitte, Mother Jones, and other engagement think tanks. If that doesn't move you, the United Nations notes that in order to end world hunger, we only need $30 billion, meaning that at that 360, we could solve world hunger 12 times over. So it seems we already waste a lot of money on leadership. Why not curtail this by investing in the right kind? Imagine the impact that positive, transformational leadership can make. I aim to see the leaders at community-based organization level, and I call them CBLs in my research, equipped to be just that. In my research, I hypothesized that they already had transformational leadership skills, and they simply needed these to be harnessed for increased success. I investigated their perceived transformational leadership competencies as per the traits I had shown you earlier. With only a sample of 15 people across various industries, I was happy to find that 75% of my respondents were women. And all my respondents were under the age of 42, like this lady above. Most of the women were in their early 20s, which I think is very encouraging for the future. Using Bernard Bass and Bruce Avolio's multi-factor leadership questionnaire, it's a validated tool that measures transformational leadership characteristics in a survey format, and you get a score out of 4 in each area, and you get 100% if you score out of 4. As you see from the above, they scored lowest on being more concerned with the needs of their followers. Like I was saying, transactional. This is something that can easily be learned, and mentorship can address this gap. What also came to light was that CBLs were only meeting 3 of their 5 transformational leadership goals. And of those, influencing via role modeling behavior had the largest gap between goal and actual goal achievement. This seemed to be in large part due to the earlier revelation of their struggle to connect with their mentees and followers' needs more. Just like the coach, their vision needed to include the success of their mentees. Lastly, in the study, a recurring theme and a need for increased self-awareness and an appreciation for a process that helps them reflect and introspect was required. Contemplative practices do not come naturally. I definitely know this. And it is not that they haven't done leadership training or they don't understand the concepts or they haven't learned enough. It's just that with the amount of work that they have to do, it just seems like one of the last priorities. And this is in the face of all the work they had to do. Holistic mentorship and 360-degree assessments on their leadership styles would be something that would help. Before I came here, I worked for a nonprofit called the Hope Factory, which grew small businesses for economic development. We offered entrepreneurs operational investments, networking, training, development opportunities. And you'll be surprised to find that what made the strongest impact, it wasn't the money. It was actually the businesses that had the most personal development done for their leaders that performed the best. This is why, for me, leadership isn't just another buzzword. It is something that changes lives. It changed my life. Thinking of Rotary's work, not one project comes to pass without leaders. And even though one of the smallest numbers of global grants projects support peace and conflict resolution, I say there is no peace and conflict resolution without capable leaders mediating it. As I stressed earlier, the types of challenges we face today related to peace require extraordinary leadership. The same is true of those mammoth sustainable development goals, which have little to no hope if we have the wrong captain steering the ship and the wrong coaches leading the team. This research was my absolute pleasure in seeing that in a country where disengagement was easy to do, young people were extremely engaged. Change is brewing in Zimbabwe, and I got to meet some of the baristas. The country's future is safe not because of this upcoming election, because political leaders matter and they're influential, but they aren't the whole picture. True and deep, long-lasting change comes when those who already do the work in building communities are the loudest voices, the most prudent policymakers, and the owners of their community's development. Accelerating their skills surely will see us achieve the results we lag in development work and the ever-sustainability we require. I end with the recognition of this woman I have so much respect for, an effective Rotarian leader in Zimbabwe. Her name is Stella Dongo. She's a role model, she's committed, she has motivated many in Zimbabwean Rotary circles and community levels. So much so that she received a Global Woman of Action Award at the UN headquarters from Rotary for her efforts. I remember seeing her picture at the Atlanta Convention last year and being so proud to have not just recognized a Zimbabwean, but a lady. We need more female leaders. If she, as one of our part-time community leaders, can do so much, imagine what we could do with full-time community leaders who are equipped, who are confident, and who are inspiring at every level. They are the ones who are standing full-time for the needs of our society. And I think we should support them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? I don't know whether this is working. Okay. I've learned so much from Janai the last year, so Thank you for teaching me to think broadly about leadership as a typical political scientist who focus on political leaders. So thank you. Any questions? Yeah? Yes.
So how can one region, that region in Africa, spawn Mugabe and Kama at the same time? Kama from Botswana, the leader. Well, now that's one question. The other thing, the other thing is succession. Whenever you look at a tyrant or a dictator, and it doesn't have to be anywhere. I mean, there's no succession planning in that.
This is true.
How does one go about getting that in leadership like you're trying, not leadership that's not transformational?
That's a great question, and a lack of succession in the leadership in the country is one of the things that actually made me have the question. I'd forgotten to mention that I have political and non-political leadership ambitions of my own, and part of that had to do with wanting to be part of the change. I think succession and sustainability are very related, and thinking of an example, I've learned about how you have pets in Rotary. So anyone who's going to be standing in a gap needs to make sure that they're passing it on to the people who are coming. But because we're not prioritizing leadership development currently, there is no room for sustainability. It's based on personality. So there's no one we like right now who could replace Mugabe. So nothing's going to happen. But I'm saying if we change our discourse on that, if we now say, okay, great leadership on all levels is important, more people will feel comfortable to step up and actually be part of the succession plan. Because a lot of it has to do with that picture I showed earlier about who wants to lead the change. We all know what's wrong. We all know what needs to be done. We all have the answers. But then when it's like, okay, you take it on, and it's like, well, I mean, that's different.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yes. I think that's what it is, yeah.
Hi, so I'm familiar with the theories of leadership that you've been talking about, and I'm interested as someone like yourself who's standing in that gap and being the translator of these Western theories of leadership that have been developed in Western context. How do they translate back to an African context?
Well, we knew we were going to get this question. Okay, I don't know if you ever heard of Hofstede's work, but I hope I explained this well. You'll find that when it comes to certain dynamics around power and around accountability, there isn't much. I mean, you can see that there's something different between how they do it in the USA, as an example, versus somewhere like Pakistan and Iran, which is more of large power distance, strong uncertainty. So for me, I don't think that Zimbabwe is too different from this middle patch right here. And what that means is we already understand a lot of the concepts of leadership. I mean, the research has already shown that a lot of African leaders are embodying certain leadership styles, regardless of culture and all those other elements. So for me, when we're doing the training, that is when you best have to tweak it. I think part of the reason why there was the problem of not focusing on the needs of followers, as I was talking earlier, part of that is because we are communitarian, right? You're not meant to be seen to be showing favor to someone, but it's translating it to say, if I show enough leadership development for this person, then 8 other people after them are going to get supported, so the community still benefits. So I think the translation is not so much of saying, let's just chuck all of the leadership work and say, let's find what's happening in the community and how to do it, because there are a lot of things we still do have to change, and we have to influence for that, and we still have to inspire. I don't know if that. Yeah. Translation to be done. Oh, definitely. This is why I think the development itself, part of it is we don't talk enough about leadership. I mean, I know that when I moved to South Africa and now I had to do work in leadership studies, that's when I started thinking about leadership. But growing up, I mean, the closest I got to it was when I was an interactor and I learned service above self. And that was a great start, but then what do I do after that in my context?
Any other questions? Yes, back there. Yeah. Yes. You.
Thank you tonight for making the space that we often see for African women. So I really appreciate changing our stereotypes.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And following up with the question that, I don't know your name, asked, you mentioned at the end of your presentation that we should be encouraging this and being attentive to cultural differences and cultural values. How do you think our role should be in encouraging more leadership, but it's attentive to cultural differences and to the nuances that each community has?
I think there's definitely, we have culture clashes everywhere in the world, even right here. And it goes back to, I don't know if you were there earlier when Linda was talking about dialogue. I think it's a problematic approach when you sort of come and say, you just have to do this, and this is the way we're going to fix everything. And I think there's certain elements of development work now that do that. But it's actually saying to the people, we see you, and we see the value in the way you're doing these things. Let's understand how you got to this position, and let's understand how we can try to get out of it and build rather than destroy. Because I think that's one of the problems of the discourses. My way is better than yours. My concept of human rights is better than yours, and it shouldn't be a competition. I think we should be looking at the collaboration side of it. Yeah.
Yes.
So much. Kind of building on the last question, how do you deal with the worldwide racism, I think, of many parts of the world toward Africa? And thank God for movies like Black Panther, that while they may be suspect in some things, they just destroy the concept of what we think of about Africa. And so how can we in this country, with our own racial issues and other things, have a better understanding to help support the efforts of people like yourself? Thank you so much for what you're doing.
I think part of it goes with, as an example, I'm trying to apply for a global grant where there'll be a leadership development project in Zimbabwe. And so for me, having people on this side, or even if it's in Australia or other developed countries, working with Rotarian clubs in Zimbabwe, as an example, that's going to create an overlap where the people here try to understand what's going on in Zimbabwe. And it's not so much, we're going to be prescriptive about this is what you need to do in terms of leadership. I think it's an exchange, right? You learn about what's going on in that context, and then you learn what best intervention would work in that context. The learning part, I think, is the gap. That's what I keep stressing, that I think it's more, this is the model, we're just going to export it. But there has to be some type of exchange, the relational side of it. Oh, sorry.
In some African countries like Nigeria and Rwanda, you have a lot of tribal tensions. Do you have those in, and how would you work through those? I mean, I've got some familiarity with the other two countries, and it's very difficult. And second, quick question, what is the currency in use in Zimbabwe now?
Oh, all right. First one, very easy. We use the US dollar, and as a result of that, because we're not making the money, cash flow has been a huge problem. Yes, so I'll give you an example. We currently have people queuing up to 2 hours to get $20 cash. So this is a really huge issue. I think that was a really big part of a civil war that had been almost brewing before we had the forced resignation. So this is one of the first priorities that they're looking at. But I still think beyond that, we need to worry about what's happening at the community level in terms of the leadership there. And the second question? Yes, tribalism. Oh, tribalism, as I said, is a problem everywhere, right? That's a world problem. I think it's tearing away the layers of what got a person there in the first place in terms of mindset, right? It's stories we tell ourselves. So people from this tribe are evil. People from this tribe are, thieves. People from this tribe are not trustworthy, right? The only way you can actually change those stories is know people from that tribe personally. So I think we keep having conversations here, but it's like, have you sat next to someone who's different from you and spoken to them for at least 3 hours about their life and everything that's happened to actually understand what got them there? So I think that is really important.
In my experience in Africa, I tend to interpret that that leadership is a reflection of colonization, because those colonizations left people fighting. And that's what male leaders has been doing in all Africa. But on the other hand, I have to congratulate the female leaders in Africa. They were able in Liberia to throw the tailor. They were able in Rwanda to become one of the fewer countries in the world with the bigger number of ministers who are women. And also, not only that, and I'm very sorry you didn't mention this, Ubuntu, a great lesson to the world, comes from your region. And Ubuntu, together with what we can interpret as the female principle, that is very key when we now look into the new approach of leadership, have to be there. So I noticed that you have all elements that to build, because you yourself seem to me are, how do you say, what's the word in English? You, like in the theater, you are the personification of the leadership. And this is the great responsibility of female in Africa. Thank you very much. It has been very inspiring for me to hear you. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.
So, do I? Button. Okay. Sorry. I can talk after.
Sorry.
Oh, my goodness. Now I switch off the mic. I forgot to switch it off.
It's on now.
Thanks God I'm Italian, so.
So Francesca showed us the way. Shake it out, right? Well done. Fantastic. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for everything you've done to help us connect at an emotional level as well as an intellectual one to what you're helping us to see differently. So can I ask for some new voices? People who would like to
Yes, this is nice to keep it on.
ask any questions, amplify any points.
Was I so scary?
Can you hear me? Yes. The Nobel Peace Prize Center, they are offering a forum in September in Minneapolis, and the theme is water and peace. And if you would like to have more information, or anyone, I'm happy to share it with you over lunch. I think it would be lovely if perhaps you could attend. I don't know if you're going to be in this area in September, but anyway, I think that would be lovely for you to make some of your thoughts known in that particular type of environment.
Thank you. Oh, great.
Yeah.
And maybe I can say something. Okay, yeah.
I don't need a microphone.
Another Italian.
I just wanted to ask Dr. about this important mission that you're on and how the Rotary clubs in Colombia are responding to it. Is there a significant effort by Colombian Rotary clubs to start the wheel turning on the views of nature and how we need to protect it?
On this particular issue of the use of nature, I don't know. Rotary clubs are involved in the post-agreement phase and in many initiatives. In particular, I've met some people in Bogota, and I knew that, for example, last May, training was organized with indigenous women leaders in peace building and mediation. And I also had asked to participate if it was possible, but then with the dates, we couldn't coincide. And I know that there are several initiatives, but I didn't know the details on that. And I could not meet too much because I was very often in the field, in the villages, and so it was difficult for me during the week to coincide with meetings with Rotarians. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll reach out to a Rotary club in Bogota.
Yeah.
Okay,
I have a very nice contact of a former peace fellow. He actually studied in Bradford, and he is now member of one of the Bogota Rotary clubs. So I can put you in contact with him. Yeah.
Can I answer his question as well?
Sure, Chris.
The question about Rotary in Colombia, actually the Rotary Foundation and their new partnership with the Institute for Economics and Peace are actually a positive peace project is underway. In January 2019, there will be a major Rotary Foundation initiative in there with some Canadian and U.S. Rotary districts helping to fund it. The goal is to train a group of 200 young leaders in the concepts of positive peace. So Rotary is taking baby steps, but I think the ripples will be big.
All right, I have been told I have one more baby question that can be asked by somebody who hasn't asked the question, and I think that would be you. So if you can ask a baby question and a baby answer. No, this guy, because you had a chance, right, as I recall.
No, James, please.
Sorry.
Here's our chair. It's our former chair.
I'm very sorry.
I would like to listen from the... Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I want to point out that you have our only hope. We have a whole world built on oil. Now we must have a whole world built on water. The health of our water is absolutely essential for our survival, and your observation of the biocentric universe is literally our only hope.
James Peacock. No?
Yeah. You want to invite, so she wants to invite you, Jim, to be the last question, if you want to.
You were.
Jim Peacock.
You were standing up before, so I didn't know.
Simply, the points have been made about, oh, the mic. Many points have been made which lead to a question for the Rotary Foundation and the Rotary organization. The 6 priorities do not include the environment. Should they and might they?
Quick question, answer.
Yes, actually. Yes, I was going to show, I will take advantage to go further because I have to do it anyway. Like the six focus, were the 6 areas of focus. Actually, the environment is there in almost the 6 of them. So it's indirectly, of course, it's a matter of make this more explicit and start really working towards that.
Thank you very much, Fran. Well done. You did it.
My goodness.
Good morning. My name is Johanna Schubert. I'm a psychotherapist from Germany, and the last thing that stands between you and your lunch. I'm currently completing my Master's of Public Health Leadership at Gilling School of Global Public Health here in Chapel Hill. And I'm going to show you how refugee mental health is a highly underestimated challenge and a super important issue in our efforts to build peace. I want you to meet Mohammed. Mohammed is from Aleppo in the north of Syria. He's 14 years old, and one night when he was asleep at home, soldiers of the Syrian military bombed his house. Half the house was destroyed, and his mother and siblings who were sleeping in that half were instantly killed. He, his father, and some other siblings who were sleeping in the other half survived. But the staircase had been destroyed, so they had to jump out of the 5th floor in order to escape the fire in their apartment. Doing so, he broke both his legs. He received preliminary surgery at the last functioning clinic in Aleppo at that time, in dust, haste, and bad quality. As soon as the remaining family could, they left the city, and they walked on broken legs and in flip-flops for 2 years, all the way from Syria, through Turkey, the Balkans, and Austria, until they arrived in my beautiful hometown of Landshut in Bavaria. My colleagues at our children's hospital were able to fix his legs. He was in a lot of pain, but he was a real trooper. But the bigger problem than his legs turned out to be something else. One day, I received a phone call from desperate and really angry nurses, because I'm the intercultural expert at the center, so they thought I would be the best person to talk to, because they couldn't communicate with the boy. They said, whenever we serve him food, he throws it at us. We bring him fresh clothes, he throws it in our faces. And what is even worse, he does not get any rest. He's playing on his phone the entire night instead of getting some sleep. So I came over and got an interpreter, a young Syrian doctor who assisted me in communicating with the boy. And as it turns out, he was not playing Candy Crush or chatting on Facebook all night. He had found a video of his dead mother being pulled out of the rubble in pieces. And he was browsing the internet to find more of those videos to see what happened to his family. As you can easily tell, without being a psychotherapist, the boy was severely traumatized. If we look at refugees and look at the numbers of psychotrauma and mental health issues, we find that 10 to 50% of adult refugees and 50 to 90% of all children suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. But that's not everything. Up to 20% suffer from mental health conditions that they had prior to the war. Like in every other society on the planet, this is a global average. This is human nature. And yet, the remarkable thing is they made it thus far and survived a war. This is pretty impressive if you think about it. So Mohammed was lucky. He made it all the way to the west. But as you heard from Gabriele today, 80% of the Syrian refugees end up in refugee camps around Syria. This one is Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. If we look at where the refugees end up, Turkey accepted 3.6 million Syrian refugees, which is 4.5% of their own population. Lebanon accepted almost 1 million, which is 22% of their own population. Germany accepted 700,000, which is still 0.85% of the population, so we can do it. Jordan accepted 660,000, which is 7% of their population, and the US accepted 18,007, which is 0.006% of the population. So as I said, 80% of refugees end up in camps along the border. So this is Zatari refugee camp, which is at the north of Jordan, bordering to Syria. And I want to tell you a bit more about this camp. In this camp, there's an estimate of 80,000 people living. It has its own small economy with 3,000 small informal businesses. It has 11 schools with 20,771 students. And it's supported by 34 national and international organizations who keep the camp going. My master's research was about the health support, and in particular, the mental health support. So let's look at that a bit as well. Zatari camp has 2 hospitals, 9 healthcare centers, and 120 community health volunteers for 80,000 people. They experience 80 births per week. They just had their 5,000th delivery. They have 14,000 health consultations every week. They have 634 mental health consultations every week, which amounts to 6,300 mental health patients that we know of currently in the camp. 50% of the children in the camp have suicidal thoughts because of the misery they live in. There is key challenges to mental health support in the camp, but also in Jordan in particular, in general. So one big challenge that we have everywhere in the world, but there in particular, is the stigma. People don't like to admit having mental disorders because it's not accepted in society, like a broken leg, you know? So this is a problem, but also the shortage of culturally attuned mental health care service providers who speak the language, who understand the culture, the way people express their mental health issues is also a problem. I could go to Jordan and provide psychotherapy, but it wouldn't be of much use because I don't speak the language. I can't connect to the people as the locals can do. And the third problem, as good as it is for refugees to be integrated in the host society, to live decentralized, not in the camps, but inside of the cities, just like the normal population, it is a problem for mental health support because we don't know where people are. We cannot reach them as well as we can reach the people in the camps. So that is a bit of an additional challenge. So the answer to this challenge was formulated and developed by a group of organizations headed by the World Health Organization, the UN Refugee Agency, the Red Cross, and the International Medical Corps. And it's called the Mental Health Gap Action Program, which is active worldwide, but particularly in conflict zones and around conflict zones. So how does that support work? They assume that mental health services should be organized like a pyramid. The broader the basis down there, the more frequently it's used, the more important it is, and the cheaper it also is. The higher we come up in the pyramid, the fewer these services should be needed, and the more expensive they are and the more intense they are. So the bottom of the pyramid is self-care. People have to be aware of their issues. They have to be aware how to help themselves and how to help each other. This is what we need most. And then we need, of course, informal community care, peer-to-peer support, community religious support, all the things that a community can do to help themselves without a specialist. And then we come into the specialist area where we have primary healthcare centers that are also trained in recognizing and first aiding mental health issues and referring people to the specialists that they need if the condition is too severe. So that taps into psychiatric services, psychotherapists, and community mental health centers. And only in the most exceptional and severe cases we need, of course, long-term care in patients in psychiatric institutions. But that should be very rare. In Jordan, the health system is actually the other way around. It's a reverted pyramid, and it's a tiny pyramid compared to what it should be like. So what does the World Health Organization and their team do? They try to reduce the stigma in society that people are able to accept help when they need it and to recognize when they need help. They also try to improve the healthcare system both from the top and from the bottom. So educating the population, but also changing the policy of the country that they have sustainable funds to run the health system. And to empower refugees and also the local vulnerable population to help themselves and each other, and to nudge governments to really have a sustainable plan that they don't have to depend on aid for the rest of their lives. This all increases actually the local mental health workforce, that you have local specialists who can help not only the refugees, because one day, hopefully, they will be able to return to their home countries, but then we have something sustainable that stays for the local population that is equally in need of mental health services. The evaluations are still underway, but we have some very promising numbers, especially these fellows benefit a lot from these mental health efforts. So we found a significant increase in actually the status quo of children's mental health already, and it looks promising that for adults it is the same. It's kind of intuitive, but we actually have the numbers. So what happened to Mohammed? We were lucky, and he was lucky. We were able to connect him to a specialized organization called Refugio München, which is an organization dealing with traumatized refugees, and he's doing much, much better. He's actually doing a job training. His family, his father found a job, remarried, so it's a really happy ending for Mohammed. When you hear 80% are far away, that still means 20% of people are in our middle, right? They're right here. So what can we do here to support them? Well, there's three big levels. First of all, there's the political level. And we really have to think about our security strategies and the resulting responsibilities, a very complex issue. On a societal level, the first thing that displaced populations need is safety and security. Cash transfers, we heard, is a great means, but there is actually a lot more, and especially in Germany, we have a huge problem with attacks on refugees that have skyrocketed since 2015 in no proportion to the influx of people. So this is something we have to solve, because this is something psychology cannot do anything about, right? So after that, it is very important that refugees know the host country, the culture, the language, to be able to integrate themselves. Very important. But they also need to receive respect, to have dignity, and also autonomy, as we heard in Gabriele's presentation. And thirdly, they need specialized mental health care services to take care of their needs. How about North Carolina? North Carolina gets 2,700 refugees each year. Most of them actually come from Burma and from Bhutan and from Iraq and 40 other countries. And they spread all across North Carolina. 70 families, roughly, are here in Chapel Hill from Syria. And actually, these refugees, they also contribute something to society. They contribute to the local economy. They also bring diversity, new ideas, fresh workforce. So if we use this resource cleverly, actually both sides can benefit tremendously. And there's one thing that I want to draw your attention to in particular. So if you want to help displaced individuals and families, the most important thing is to show compassion without any paternalism, but also without any fear. They're human beings like everybody else. And if you want to do something in specific, I can recommend 3 organizations to you who are operating right here where we are. Number one, and I'm particularly fond of that because I've worked with them myself, and I'm very convinced about the work they are doing, is UNC Refugee Wellness. They are actually running out of funding by July, so they need a lot of support. But they do a tremendous job in helping refugees here to settle in, but also to get support for their mental health issues in the family. And then there's the Raleigh immigrant community, which is also doing a tremendous job, and World Relief Durham. And if you Google a bit, you will find about like 20 more organizations and churches who also do a tremendous job. What I want you to take home today from my presentation is refugees are much more competent than we think. And yet there are things that they do need help with. Receiving countries need a really good system to provide the assistance and the support that refugees really need, like mental health support. And you don't need to be a government to be of help. There's something everybody can do right here, right now. Thank you.
It's my honor to open up the question and answer session, and we're so proud of everything that Han is doing, both locally and globally. Questions? Right there.
Hannah, I have heard that refugees do better if they are in their own territory. Is that true? Would you address that?
Well, it depends on the territory. That's the short answer to the question. I mean, of course, as long as I'm in a culture that I'm familiar with, I can communicate in my own language. If I'm safe, that is the most important bit, then I agree. But if I'm not safe, which is basically the entire territory of Syria, and even in the border areas, then I'm not okay. So these people have to leave. They don't have a choice. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Would you know in the camps such as these, what you said the population of the really troubled population, which is PTSD and other kinds of mental illness, which is the top of the pyramid, which required most attention. What would be the recidivism rate, and what is your average kind of, and what kind of population you're dealing with, and what happens to them? Is that mostly PTSD, or is it mostly mental illness?
It is actually a pretty wild mixture of all sorts of disorders, and also post-traumatic stress disorder. It's what's mostly on the news, right? We hear about PTSD, but actually depression is a much bigger issue. In Germany also, people are not allowed to work for 15 months at least, and then they can start working, but for 15 months they're bound to be bored all day. So you can imagine all sorts of issues that arise with systems like that. So actually, just because somebody is traumatized doesn't mean necessarily that they need help. It's only when the condition worsens, when people get incapacitated, disabled through their condition, then we actually need to become active. So trauma is actually when everybody is traumatized and everybody understands that from each other, actually the community takes pretty good care of themselves, and only when it gets too bad, and I've been dealing with some heavy cases where people had epileptic seizures because of torture and experiences that they had, then of course we need to do everything we can as a medical system. But actually the majority, as you saw in the pyramid, the majority of problems can be solved actually on a community or individual level if the support network is there.
Was wondering if those refugee agencies that you have spoken about has also taken into consideration those displaced by hurricanes and other crises that we've had recently, especially those with Mother Nature.
Actually, at UNC, there is a wonderful program that's called the Community Preparedness and Disaster Management Certificate, which I'm currently finishing. And from that experience, I can tell you that actually the US has a remarkable system of psychosocial support, at least here in North Carolina. They're really, really good and trying really hard. But it is hard because mental health is usually forgotten. It's usually overlooked because what is more dramatic is, of course, physical injuries, is the houses, is the food and the water safety. So, of course, these things need to be taken care of first, right? But for example, the German Red Cross, they realized that having psychologists on board, even on scene, is actually a great, great help to deliver first aid, and that people who received psychosocial first aid, which sometimes can consist of a blanket and a cup of tea, you know, or somebody to lean on and cry on the shoulder, so that this can actually prevent severe mental illness from developing long term. So to answer your question, there is a system. Of course, it's by far not sufficient. It needs to be built, but I think the awareness is there. The money is just the main issue. It's hard to raise money for mental health services.
Thank you. You mentioned the need for community-sensitive mental health interventions. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about that. I know that there's been criticism of mental health interventions from more individualistic countries in places like Rwanda or even in the Middle East, where interventions based on reliving trauma that might be useful in northern or western countries don't necessarily work. How can we work around that? How can we move in those directions of being more community sensitive in our interventions?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. And Rwanda is a wonderful example. After the genocide, Western psychotherapists poured into Rwanda to deliver psychotrauma therapy. And at some point, they were all kicked out by the people. And for a very good reason, because they said, you know, we have experienced so much hardship and trauma, and then you put us in dark rooms, and we have to relive all that horror again with you in a conversation. The way we deal with trauma, we go outside in the sun and we dance with our friends and we sing until we feel better. Kind of intuitive, right? So actually that's a very important issue, and that is where the local people come in, because you can have a Western clinical training, but in order to apply it to the culture, you have to really be immersed in the culture and have grown up in that culture to really be able to adapt the bits and pieces that do work. And a lot of it does work, like EMDR, which is you follow the fingers and look back and forth and you think of your trauma and then it goes away. Sounds like miracle work. It really is. I've done it. It's amazing. But this actually works because this is a biological process. But all the psychological, cognitive processes that we use, they're highly culturally sensitive, and this is why we need the locals to apply the proper principles.
Thank you. One more question. The gentleman up there.
I think it would be really helpful for, like, when refugees go into, like let's say Germany or something, that the people there make them feel like they're welcome. Because if they don't feel like they're welcome, they're not going to try to learn the language, or they're not going to feel comfortable in the place that they're in. So take a whole community in the area that they go to make them feel that they're welcome in order for them to start actually living there and like actually improve their mental health.
Absolutely important comment. Thank you very much for that. And in Germany, you can actually see that in real life. You see in Munich, people were at the railway station and they clapped and welcomed and cheered and brought teddy bears and pretzels and beer for the non-Muslims. And actually, if you look at Bavaria, we have hardly any problems. Of course, there's a certain rise in crime rates, but it's absolutely equivalent to the number of people who come in. So it's not that refugees or migrants would cause any problems. Where we have clashes is in Eastern Germany, where people were not greeted with pretzels and but where people were greeted really with burning torches and bats and yelling crowds who wouldn't let them get off the bus and told them off, and where the police even dragged people out of that buses into the cheering crowds, like by their neck, children who were crying, who were afraid. It was horrible scenes. If you look at that, I'm ashamed of my nation that this could happen. It's tremendously horrible. And this is where we have clashes, because of course, if I come from a war zone, of course, if I'm not welcome, if I'm being threatened, if people throw Molotov cocktails through my window, which is also what happened, then of course I have to arm myself. I have to be prepared to fight back and defend myself, especially if the security is not doing anything for myself. So thank you for your comment, because this is extremely crucial.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.
Please remember there is lunch, a lunch buffet line upstairs, tables upstairs as well. We want to be back here and start promptly at 1:10 past 1, so please help us.